Number 10. Beast. Beast was actually chosen to replace another member of the Illuminati. He was given hidden telepathic memories, which would awaken upon the death of the man he was meant to be replacing. Hank McCoy is known for his genius intellect and is also quite strong and quite dexterous, often referred to as the bouncing blue beast. He specializes in genetics, electronics, and of course biochemistry. In fact, he became blue as a result of him ingesting a serum that he had created which altered his biochemistry, and after not managing to take the antidote for said serum in time, making his secondary mutation permanent. The man and mutant that the Beast would replace on the team was Professor X, who placed hidden telepathic prompts in Hank's mind. When Professor X did die, Beast was then compelled to enter his secret room, where the Mind Stone and evidence of his participation in the Illuminati were hidden, just as the rest of the Illuminati team arrived, who were assembling the Infinity Gauntlet at the time. What perfect timing. He's like, I feel like I should go into this room and maybe join the Illuminati. Oh, there they are. Oh, hey guys. Number 9. Professor X. One of the most gifted telepaths in the Marvel Universe, it should not be surprising that Professor Charles Xavier has been asked to, and at times agreed to, join up with the Illuminati. Also, although we don't talk about it as much, Charles is also super smart, and not just because he's a telepath or anything like that. He's well educated and seems to have a penchant for inventing as well. Back in the early days of the X-Men series, he's pretty much constantly creating devices on the fly to help combat evil foes, and builds and rebuilds Cerebro when it is destroyed. Pretty wild stuff, really. And then of course there's the stuff that we generally associate him with when it comes to his intellect, such as genetics and mutation. He also is an adept strategist and often comes up with ways to outsmart even the most unstoppable of villains. Number 8. Black Bolt. While the Inhumans don't often get a ton of love when it comes to their popularity amidst the other superhero factions, Black Bolt is one hero who tends to still stand out and stand strong when it comes to their ranks. And you cannot deny that even if he's not the most well-known superhero, he's still one of the most powerful. As an Inhuman, his power, which he received after being exposed to the Terrigen Mist, is in his voice. He can basically emit like a strong concussive blast by just uttering a whisper. Because of this, Black Bolt typically doesn't speak normally, but instead communicates through physicality and telepathically, often through one of his wives, his main wife really, the Inhuman Medusa. Medusa in fact was also a member of the Illuminati, though sadly she wasn't quite powerful enough to make the cut for our list this time around. But still, I'm glad I got to mention her, because I was like, there's not even any ladies on this list. Although traditionally the Illuminati in the Marvel world is pretty male dominant. That's okay. Their wives show up at one point to be like, what are you guys doing? What is this? This is a mess. Let's not do this. Wives/partners. Number 7. Black Panther. When T'Challa was initially approached to join the Illuminati, he said no. He thought it was a bad idea to try and put together a group of geniuses who thought they knew better than everyone else. And I gotta say, I kind of agree with T'Challa. However, when facing the threat of the incursions, it was then that he actually saw the value in the big brain, all-powerful group, as a team of heroes who could basically use their combined brainpower, muscles, influence, and experience to try and save the Earth and possibly other alternate Earths as well. Black Panther is known for his genius-level intellect as well as his skills in combat. He is highly experienced and trained, and also has the powers of Black Panther as a result of exposure to the heart-shaped herb. Not only that, but Black Panther also works hard every day to improve his already impressive abilities and skills, constantly challenging himself to do more and be even better. He also typically comes with like the entire force of Wakanda, since he's usually leading Wakanda, so there's also that. And he's a really good leader, so yeah. Number 6. Mr. Fantastic. When it comes to intelligence, Reed Richards is believed to be one of the most brilliant minds around in the Marvel Universe. It is for this reason that he was approached to join the Illuminati group. He was also part of the precursor event that basically helped to inspire the creation of this team, when he and some of the other most powerful heroes from Earth decided to confront the King of Skrullos to basically tell him to ensure that the Skrull forces leave the Earth alone. They were like, don't mess with us. Of course, this ended up resulting in him and other heroes being captured by the Skrulls for a time and experimented on before escaping. Yeah, not the best plan it turns out. Still, despite the fact that not all plans that he's been a part of have gone smoothly, the fact remains that Reed is still an influential figure who is also a super genius. Plus, he's got stretching powers. No one ever wants to acknowledge how useful those can be because, I mean, they are kind of ridiculous, but there are many times that Reed has actually used his power set to save the day, and at times, the world. Number 5. Captain Britain. Brian Braddock, you could say, hails from the more mystical realm of Marvel. Initially known as Captain Britain, Brian now goes by the name of Captain Avalon, as Betsy has taken up and kept his mantle even after dying and kind of being resurrected while wielding it. But I believe during the time he was on the Illuminati team, I think we still called him Captain Britain, so hence why I'm using that name here. Brian might not be the first person you think of when you think of genius level intellect, but he ended up being imbued with all the knowledge and secrets of the Starlight Citadel when he was sent back from Otherworld to Earth 616, just as the incursions were becoming a major problem. As such, he ended up being invited onto the Illuminati team to help them figure out how to combat the seeming unstoppable and growing threat of the incursions. It should also be noted that Brian Braddock is actually super smart, even without the valuable Starlight Citadel knowledge. He possesses a genius level intellect and is a scientist who specializes in engineering and physics. I feel like we don't talk about that a lot, but that is definitely a thing Brian has. He is a scientist. Number 4. Namor. Namor is Marvel's first superhero and mutant who, despite his historical significance, often falls by the wayside. I mean, we don't even have Namor in the MCU yet. What's up with that? Where is he? Still, the King of Atlantis has proven to be a powerful ally and very valuable asset to the Illuminati team. In fact, when Black Panther couldn't bring himself to follow through on a plan to blow up an alternate Earth to prevent the destruction of Earth 616 in the face of the incursions, it was Namor who pressed that fated detonation button, willing to do whatever it took to try and keep the Earth safe. Granted, his intense determination and somewhat lack of morals is also what makes Namor a sometimes villain and often more anti-hero than straight up hero, which really just means he's often more interesting and complex than your standard superhero fare. Namor himself is not necessarily a super genius like most others on the Illuminati team, but he is quite skilled when it comes to tactics, modifying Atlantean tech, and of course, diplomacy. As so many rulers are, they're like, I know how to be diplomatic. Although I feel like Namor maybe isn't the best at being diplomatic compared to some other people on this list. Number 3. Iron Man. I mean, at this point, thanks in large part due to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the whole world knows of the genius that is Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. Not only does his genius fuel his power, as it's how he's able to make his armor, but in the MCU it also helped him to crack the code of time travel, which is pretty crazy. In fact, Stark was actually the one to think up the idea to create a team of powerful and brilliant super-heroic leaders of various different types of factions in an attempt to create a sort of secret superhero government, in a way, in the comics. His plan was to create a sort of ruling body that could guide others in the superhero community, using their minds together to figure out the best course of action when it came to larger looming threats and how to deal with those threats. However, this didn't entirely work out as he planned, but the team did end up uniting, agreeing at the very least that it would be a good idea to remain connected when it came to the exchange of information. And of course it did lead to them teaming up to do things, eventually. Number 2. Doctor Strange. Known for being the master of mysticism, when it comes to the magical side of Marvel, there is almost no one who can rival the Sorcerer Supreme. While he hasn't always held the title of Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Stephen Strange has proven his mettle as a magic user. Even when he is without magic, he still manages to be a force to be reckoned with, instead sometimes relying on magical artifacts to give him that needed power boost. Steven is resourceful and knowledgeable, and he's got magic, which definitely makes him one of the most powerful heroes on the Illuminati team, and within the Marvel universe. I just think magic is like a whole area of the superhero realm that is hard to beat when it comes to power, as it can kind of allow you to do, well, pretty much anything, whatever you need it to allow you to do, as long as you know how to use that magic and you have that knowledge. It's kind of like having all the powers in one. Like I said though, as long as you have the magical skills and the magical knowledge. Although Strange definitely does have those things. Number 1. Hulk/Bruce Banner. Despite the Illuminati actually kind of being the ones behind shooting off the Hulk into space, where he would then end up landing and living on Sakaar, finding happiness there for a brief time before it was all basically destroyed, Bruce Banner too also has been a member of the Illuminati. I know it seems a little surprising. Of course, this was more a Bruce Banner thing than a Hulk thing. At the time, Banner was more in control when it came to his changes into the Hulk as well. Banner ends up recruited by the Illuminati in the face of the incursions, like so many members before and after him. Desperate to stop their world and countless others from being destroyed, Bruce is recruited for his brilliant intellect. While not physically strong compared to the Hulk, mentally Banner is one of the strongest around. And if we're talking physically, then the Hulk has that covered. Bruce Banner has been said to be the most brilliant nuclear scientist on Earth before, and has also been known to dabble in other areas of science with his super genius intellect, including biology, engineering, and architecture. He's also believed to really be the only expert scientist in the very, very narrow field of radiation-based mutation. Well, I say narrow field, but maybe in comics not such a narrow field? Number 10. Inhuman. Black Bolt gets his power from the collective powers of his people, known as the Inhumans. What is an Inhuman? It's kinda like a mutant like the X-Men are, but different. It's actually also kinda like an Eternal, to be honest. Instead of being born with an X gene, the power for Inhumans isn't inherently activated at any point, and the potential to manifest powers comes from their bloodline and lineage. Miss Marvel, aka Kamala Khan, who will have her own Disney Plus series airing soon, is known for being an Inhuman. Her powers manifested when she was exposed to the Terrigen Mists, which appeared on Earth. It was in this way that Kamala even learned she was a part of the Inhuman family tree. Although, I'm not sure they're gonna go that route with Kamala in her Disney Plus series. I don't even think she's gonna be an Inhuman, but I guess we'll see what happens. Black Bolt himself was born with powers because he underwent Terrigenesis while in his mother's womb, with her being experimentally exposed to the mist while she was pregnant with her son Blackagar. Number 9. KREE Connection. The KREE are coming in. Coming in hot. I don't know what this dance is. That's the KREE dance, I guess. The Inhumans are actually a race that were in fact created by the KREE. If you've heard me talk about the Eternals before to explain their origins, you know that they were created by the Celestials, who experimented on humans to create this new race of beings about 1 million years ago, also creating their enemies, the Deviant race. Similarly, the Inhumans were a result of KREE visiting Earth and experimenting on humans also a long time ago, finding a way to bring out hidden potential within them and basically creating the Inhuman race, who have the potential to manifest superpowers. The KREE had planned to use the Inhumans along with other genetically altered races of their design across the cosmos to use in their seemingly never-endless war with the Skrulls, but this plan ended up being abandoned by the Supreme Intelligence. And now there isn't even a war between the KREE and the Skrulls in the comics anymore, because now we have the Alliance, which is them together. Huh. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show our channel some love on a different platform, you can head on over to Facebook and give us a like and a follow. It really does help us out, so thank you. Number 8. Yes, that is his real name. Black Bolt is Inhuman royalty. When we are first introduced to him in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he is introduced as Blackagar Boltagon, leading Steven to respond upon hearing his name, "Really?" And yes, that is really his name, even in the comics. His brother Maximus is also a Boltagon, but I suppose considering that Black Bolt is considered to be one of the primary, if not the primary Inhuman hero in the world of Marvel, it makes sense, as absurd as it sounds, that his name would be an alliteration. A lot of heroes created early on had names that would be considered alliteration. Alliteration is when the beginning of a word next to another word, or close together with another word, both begin with the same sound or letter, such as Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, Scott Summers, or even Betsy Braddock, or even Blackagar Boltagon, or Black Bolt. Number 7. King of the Inhumans. Not only is Blackagar Boltagon an Inhuman, but as I said, he's also royalty. He is actually the king of the Inhumans. He ended up inheriting the responsibility of ruling monarch due to him being the firstborn of the previous king and queen, Aegon and Rhinda. Tragically, Black Bolt inherited the throne after the untimely death of his parents. They died as a result of one of Maximus's villainous plots, albeit by accident. Maximus's plot wasn't necessarily to kill his parents, but he was conspiring with the alien race known as the KREE. As a result, when Maximus attempted to escape in one of the KREE ships, Black Bolt was forced to use his great power, his voice, to prevent the ship from getting away. Tragically, it fell out of the sky and then kinda crash landed into the Parliament building, destroying it and killing their parents and a few other important Inhumans of note. Black Bolt was crowned thereafter as the new king. Number 6. Maximus. Yes, Black Bolt does have a brother, and while Black Bolt is typically known for being a hero, his brother is actually more known for playing the role of the villain. Maximus is Blackagar's younger brother, who is typically referred to as Maximus the Mad. Maximus has the inhuman superpower to mind control others, read their minds or alter their minds, even being able to alter their personalities. He's also known for being a genius. An evil genius. Often Maximus uses his power set to try and take over the throne, attempting to rule in his brother's place after having him deposed. He also has, however, used his powers to try and help Black Bolt from time to time, but the two have a similar dynamic to, I would say, Loki and Thor. Typically Maximus can't or shouldn't be trusted, but you know, sometimes they do team up and do things together. Basically, if Maximus is like, yeah, I guess this thing is like worse than I think you are, so I guess I'll team up with you. That's usually how it goes. Or I think there was a time when he wasn't considered like mad anymore and he was kinda cool for a bit. Number 5. The floating city of ATTILAN. The Inhumans typically live in the floating city of ATTILAN. Well, it's not always floating, but for a good amount of time it did exist over Manhattan and was actually floating above it. Either ATTILAN is typically on Earth, floating somewhere around there, or is located on the moon, where it's also existed for a good amount of time in the comics. There have also been times when Black Bolt and his people, the Inhumans, have been without the floating city of ATTILAN and basically were kinda like homeless for a while. At one point that happened and no one even wanted to allow the Inhumans to stay in their nation on Earth due to prejudice against the Inhumans, thanks to the machinations of the Hidden Ones. The only person and nation at the time that would welcome the Inhumans would be Dr. Doom and his nation of Latveria. Ultimately, after the issue of Earth's prejudice against the Inhumans was resolved, even though Doom had offered Black Bolt and his people a place in Latveria, the Inhuman King refused him and instead chose to return to the moon and rebuild ATTILAN. It's kind of a very sick burn. Poor Doom. Doom's like, I mean, I'll let you guys stay here, and they're like, actually, no. Number 4. Medusa. Medusa is another very important person in Black Bolt's life, widely being considered his one true love. Black Bolt actually has had multiple wives, having to do so to basically help reconnect and bring together the alien and human races when they rejoined with their Earth-based brethren. However, of his multiple required marriages, Medusa was the only one that he was really married to that he loved. Medusa is also an Earth-based Inhuman like Black Bolt, and in fact the two of them are second cousins by marriage. Which is kind of typical, at least historically, of a royal marriage like theirs. A lot of royals tend to like marry in families. A lot of inbreeding and royalty. Ooh. Medusa and Black Bolt aren't always together in the comics, but they do frequently end up back together in the end. Medusa's power lies in her long red locks of hair, which she can manipulate and control like limbs. Her hair is not only tensile and agile, but it's also super strong. Not something you'd want to get tangled up in, trust me. Medusa is typically known as Queen of the Inhumans, but is currently known as Commander Medusa. Now thinking about that, people are probably gonna be like, actually I would want to get tangled up in Medusa's hair. I mean, I think you'd only want to do that if she likes you. Otherwise, don't do it. Number 3. Inhumans TV show. While Black Bolt makes his Marvel Cinematic Universe debut in the Doctor Strange sequel, you might still recognize the actor who plays him, and even the character. This is because Anson Mount reprised the role for the MCU. He actually first played Black Bolt in the sadly unsuccessful Inhumans TV series. While most fans enjoyed Mount's portrayal of Blackagar, it unfortunately wasn't enough to keep the show going, and it was cancelled before even all of its first season episodes aired. Ouch. Still, seeing Anson Mount reprise his role for the MCU is pretty awesome, especially if you were a fan of the Inhumans TV series, which I'm sure there were some people that were. I think there are some fans out there for Inhumans. Yo, where are those Inhumans TV series fans? Let me know that you exist in the comments. I know you're out there. Number 2. First appearance. Black Bolt might be new to a lot of people who are more MCU fans than comic book fans, but the character has actually been around for a really long time in the comics. Black Bolt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue number 45 back in 1965. Yeah, he's an old and quite established character at this point. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four is also very fitting considering how the Inhumans would continue to have a close relationship with the FF throughout their history, especially when it comes to Black Bolt and his wife Medusa. Medusa even at one point was dating Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, and Medusa's sister Crystal, an Inhuman who can control and influence the elements and who is also considered Inhuman royalty, also at one point dated the Human Torch. In fact, they actually had like quite a relationship. Yeah, if you're also wondering, yeah, there's lots of love triangles abound there, as you can imagine. Medusa and Crystal being sisters, and then Johnny, and then obviously Black Bolt's around. It was a time. Number 1. Powers. So we know Black Bolt has a powerful voice from his appearance in the MCU, but how exactly does that work? Well, it actually all has to do with the speech center of his brain, which can basically harness the power of electrons and ambient particles. In fact, you know that tuning fork that he wears on his head? That's not just a weird costume choice, it actually helps him to more fine-tune his powers. Although it also, I think, is very fitting that he wears like a tuning fork and he's using voice powers. It's kind of fun. Black Bolt is believed to be one of the most powerful Inhumans to have ever existed, which means that even using his powers to begin with had dire consequences, like when he accidentally caused the death of his parents. Black Bolt has had to train ever since he was basically a baby in how to best use his powers so that he doesn't just destroy everything when he, says words. In fact, he even grew up in isolation because of the destructive force of his powers. He can use his powers to fly, create powerful energy fields around himself, produce concussive blasts, bolster his physical strength and power, and he also possesses the power of telepathy and a strong telepathic defense. This is one of the main ways that Black Bolt actually communicates, as even a whisper could cause massive harm to those around him. Also, when it comes to that tuning fork I was talking about, it's also super cute because Lockjaw, who is basically his dog, who also should have gotten his own point on this list if I had enough time and space, also is a tuning fork. And Lockjaw is awesome. He can teleport all over the place.
At number 10 are the total personality resets that take place to both turn Tony Stark inverted and to turn him back to normal. The first inversion happens in 2015's Avengers and X-Men's Axis number 9 when a magical spell changes Tony Stark's personality and turns him into a darker version of himself, which then becomes Superior Iron Man. He has all his worst traits brought to the forefront and acts on all of them basically right away. The other personality change that takes place comes right after Superior Iron Man's story ends. This version of the character only really gets 9 issues before he's turned back to normal in the Secret Wars storyline. And although, spoiler alert, he seems to die at the end of the 9-issue run, this is still an unusually abrupt shift that takes place with Tony Stark appearing as normal again in Secret Wars. This may be a sign that the writers had some issues finding a way to transition Iron Man out of this phase, but although it does make sense that this might be a tough thing to do properly, the way he kinda just goes back to normal after everything he did in those 9 issues, it's a little jarring. At number 9 is that Superior Iron Man makes serious efforts to purchase a media conglomerate. After selling a dangerous weapon to international buyers and making billions of dollars, he decides that his next move will be to try and control how the public views him. Although the deal doesn't actually go through, this effort just shows how different this version of Tony Stark is from the one we're used to. He's still just as smart, but he's more willing to take major risks and hurt people in the process. He's so driven to make this purchase go through that he actually offers double what the company is worth to ensure that he can carry out his plans. And if he had gotten control of the media empire, his ultimate plan would probably have gone through in the end. Already having control over the masses using the extremis virus, imagine how airtight his plan would be if he also had their opinions in the palm of his hand. Luckily, the plan doesn't go through, but it's close. And that is one of the things that makes this version of Tony Stark so terrifying. He's still a relatively personable character who's good at masking his intentions. So him trying to make this purchase and getting so close to actually closing the deal shows how quickly people are ready to allow a dangerous criminal to carry out his evil plans. At number 8 is the fact that Superior Iron Man releases a popular free app to the public, which actually turns out to be a virus called the Extremis 3.0. Tony Stark's first move after his personality is inverted is that he moves to San Francisco and develops an app that he then uses to try and control the masses. The app itself is so powerful and addictive that it becomes one of the most popular apps in the world very fast, with the app starting as a free service and the effects being that it offers people beauty, intelligence, and good health It's no wonder why it gets so popular so fast. But the catch is that the app is only free for the first day, before you're obligated to pay $100 a day to keep it going. This is speculated to be a metaphor for modern mobile phone technology and the way that the public gets obsessed with it. It may even be a metaphor for the evils behind some social media developers not having the foresight to see the detrimental effects their technology has on its users. At number 7 is that Superior Iron Man actually turns Alcatraz into his own evil lair. After Tony Stark moves to the West Coast, the app isn't the only thing he creates to get himself more power in the city. He also makes the decision that he wants to settle down and buy some property to help strike up business with other investors. But this version of Stark decides it's more his style to buy a place that's right out in the open. So out in the open that it actually takes up a whole island, Alcatraz Island. And if you're not familiar with what Alcatraz Island is, it's right off the coast of San Francisco in complete view of everyone living in the city. And Stark doesn't keep his new structure humble or hidden by any means at all. He builds an enormous secret lair that he calls Stark Island, sort of like a classic evil lair that a villain from a James Bond movie would work out of. And although it's all done legally as far as we can tell, this is just another example of Superior Iron Man's grandiosity and arrogance as a villain. At number 6 is that Superior Iron Man develops a whole new armor called the ENDO-SYM armor Model 50. If you know about this suit of armor, you'd know that it's considered one of the most powerful out of all Iron Man's suits. The main property that sets this suit apart from the others is that it's made of a symbiotic material, or at least draws from the physiology of a symbiote. This means that Tony Stark can summon the armor from wherever he is, and it will crawl or float over to him and cover his body. It then hardens around him, becoming stronger than steel and arguably stronger than the original Iron Man suit. And just like a symbiote, it has properties that makes it seem like it's alive. So with a suit that's even more alive than the HUD and AI assisted original armor, it's also able to match his senses and support his each and every move without needing much verbal communication. For example, the suit actually turns red when Tony Stark gets angry, which is a pretty awesome feature actually. Even though it's basically just an aesthetic function, it proves that the armor is a living thing, which somehow makes Superior Iron Man even more intimidating than he already was. At number 5 is that Superior Iron Man starts drinking again. Normally, Tony Stark has a natural tendency towards drinking, and so he's put up some pretty serious boundaries in the past against the habit. But when his personality is inverted, Tony Stark naturally becomes more of a drinker than ever before, except with a more positive and relaxed approach to the activity. To be fair to the original Stark though, Superior Iron Man is only able to do this because of Extremis 3.0. Using the technology to keep himself healthy and relatively unaffected in any negative way by his drinking, Stark is able to indulge all he wants without issue. And in my view, this is yet another strange trait of this inverted Tony Stark, which shows another unlikable side of the former good guy. Something about him indulging in a gluttonous, unregulated lifestyle rubs me the wrong way, probably because the typical Tony, despite his issues, is able to regulate his habits and use self-control to keep himself in line, whereas Superior Iron Man is just letting loose. And although drinking surely isn't a crime, it's just an example showing that this Tony Stark isn't about to practice any self-control anytime soon, at least during this storyline. At number 4 is that Superior Iron Man actually erases Matt Murdock's memory. One of Superior Iron Man's first threats in the series is none other than Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and it's because Murdock starts to realize the harmful effects of Extremis 3.0 and decides to investigate. During this time, Daredevil occupies San Francisco as well, so this issue is all around him at all times during this storyline, and he has a hard time not noticing it. But what he finds even more disturbing is that Stark has actually been forcing the virus into people without their consent, and he's doing this through the water supply. So Daredevil does all he can think to do and fights Tony before threatening to tell everyone unless Stark stops what he's up to. But this is a big mistake because Stark instead immobilizes Murdock with his ENDO-SYM armor and wipes his memory from the last few days. And although this is a very petty move, it does work and pretty much neutralizes Murdock's motives to take down Stark's plans. If you know the comics, you know that that mind wiping is known as a pretty awful thing to do to someone, even for the worst villains. So this is a pretty nasty move by this version of Stark, who isn't even yet showing his worst side here. At number 3 is the Iron Sight program that Superior Iron Man puts in place in the city of San Francisco. When his own app coerces people into spending ridiculous sums of money per day, they start to resort to violence and other crimes to afford the service. And instead of discontinuing his app for the greater good of society, he instead develops a whole program to monitor and control the masses that he calls the Iron Sight program, which is basically a giant fleet of drones flying around San Francisco, watching people and ensuring that they're all staying in line. This would include keeping crimes down, but also monitoring internet searches and other intrusive initiatives like that. It gets to the point where basically anyone with a device finds themselves constantly accompanied by an Iron Sight drone wherever they are. This shows another side to Superior Iron Man and the lengths he will go to have complete control and total autonomous power over the people of San Francisco. At number 2 is that Superior Iron Man actually restores Daredevil's vision. After he's confronted about the evil motivations behind the Extremis virus, Tony Stark decides he wants to show off the power of the virus to convince Daredevil of its efficacy. But he does it in a really vindictive and manipulative way. Daredevil accuses him of playing God, so Stark responds by saying that he's actually just playing human, and uses the virus to restore Matt Murdock's sight. This understandably overwhelms the typically blind hero and shows how much power Stark has actually amassed since being inverted during the Axis storyline. But this way of displaying his power is pretty shocking and arguably pretty cruel as well, especially considering Daredevil's sight is once again taken away once the effects of the virus wear off. The normal Tony Stark would never have shown off his power in this way. Well, he also wouldn't have developed such a dangerous and nefarious technology in the first place. But still, this act is pretty wild and something that people often overlook the significance of. At number 1 is that Superior Iron Man actually fights Captain America. This fight is definitely more well known in the context of top Superior Iron Man facts, but it's important to mention and put right at the top of the list because those who don't know about this battle need to know how crazy it was. Because this fight is arguably even more epic than when the two fight during the Civil War storyline. All of the buildup of Superior Iron Man becoming evil comes to an epic climax in issue 44 of Avengers, which is when this event takes place. It's also, spoiler alert, the last issue that we see Superior Iron Man in, because he actually dies at the end of the battle. Although Captain America doesn't really take the win either, they both die in a helicarrier crash. But as sad as that is, this is probably the only way Superior Iron Man's reign could have come to an end, with the only other person who knows Tony Stark as well as he knows himself taking him down for good. It's hard to say if without this intervention that Superior Iron Man would have ever concluded his tyrannical tirade, but it's good that Cap stepped in to put a stop to it just in case, thus capping off the short run of Superior Iron Man as a fun and suspense-filled storyline.
Number 10. Kashamba. Kashamba is the Black Panther belonging to the 2099 universe. He first appeared in Marvel Knights Black Panther 2099 issue number 1. Of course, because this comic is from 2004, Wakanda doesn't really appear as advanced as it might now in the modern day in comics. Our advancements just weren't that great yet. In this comic, Black Panther is overthrown by the Doctor Doom of 2099, who looks a lot like the Doctor Doom of the present day. Fortunately, Kashamba ends up avoiding being killed by Doom and inspires his people to rebel against the usurper. They are successful due to Kashamba's leadership and tactical brilliance, but in the end, Kashamba ends up being controlled by Doom, who seems to use Kashamba's Black Panther mask initially to do so. However, it is more than likely that should this story have continued, that Doom's control would be broken at some point, as Wakanda is both a nation rich with technology and magic. Either way, they'd likely figure out what was happening and find a way to break Doom's control. Number 9. Kevin Cole. Kevin Cole is kind of an anti-hero. He's a cop from Harlem, New York, and first appeared in the 1998 Black Panther series in issue number 50. His character was created by Priest and Dan Fraga. He became the Black Panther without any abilities, wearing a bulletproof Black Panther inspired suit in an effort to stand out and get a promotion. When this attracted the attention of the corrupt Lieutenant Sal Anthony, who attacked Cole and his fellow officers, hospitalizing some of them, Kevin realized he needed to do more and actually became a vigilante in order to take down Sal. Later on, Cole would aim to become a proper Black Panther with all of the mystical abilities. ERIK Killmonger, however, offered him an easier way than through Wakanda, T'Challa, and the Rite of Ascension, giving giving him a synthetic version of the heart-shaped herb, which would grant him powers in exchange for Kevin Cole dropping the Black Panther pipe dream and name, instead joining Killmonger's Panther cult and taking up the name White Tiger. Number 8. AZZURI. AZZURI was T'Challa's grandfather and the father of T'Chaka. He was the leader of Wakanda during World War II and would eventually end up teaming up with Captain America and his Howling Commandos, as well as Nick Fury to take down the Red Skull and Baron Strucker. He was one of the most deadly Black Panthers we've ever seen, more on guard and less trustworthy of any foreigners that set foot on Wakandan soil during the war. He seems to behave coldly and more ruthlessly when it comes to those he deems enemies. AZZURI was more of an independent ruler who believed in not getting involved in the war originally, but eventually came to admire and respect Captain America and the symbol he knew Cap would become for America, seeing similarities between both their positions as national heroes. Number 7. NGOZI. NGOZI is an alternate version of Black Panther from the Venomverse War Stories comic. She was originally a track star whose legs became paralyzed following an accident. She ended up bonding with the Venom symbiote, which gave her the ability to once again walk and use her legs. After the Black Panther was killed by Rhino while attempting to defend her, she convinced the symbiote to join her in taking on the Rhino and defeating him in order to protect not just themselves, but innocent civilians from his wrath as well. The Dora Milaje were inspired by her bravery and named her as the new Black Panther, and this alternate reality T'Challa's successor after her defeat of Rhino and T'Challa's death. Number 6. Black Panther. This is the first Black Panther in known history in the comics. He first appeared in Marvel Legacy issue 1, where it was established that the first Black Panther originated from the Panther tribe. Although we don't know his name, we do know he was one of the first to uncover a vibranium meteor and the power that came from it. He was one of the members of the Stone Age Avengers and was powerful enough to help defeat a Celestial. Number 5. T'Chaka. T'Chaka was T'Challa and Shuri's father. As a ruler of Wakanda, he believed in both preserving and upholding the traditions and magic of their people, while also working hard towards pushing forward with technological advancements. He believed that both ideals could coexist and that a nation should progress but not forget their past or their history. As a ruler, T'Chaka was also bestowed with the powers of Black Panther, granted to him by the heart-shaped herb. As such, he had heightened senses and maintained peak physical condition and capabilities throughout his life. Not quite superhuman, but still above average when it came to his strength, speed, agility, and durability. Basically, think of an Olympic level athlete. As leader of Wakanda, he also had the strength of the nation at his back, and as a member of the royal family, he was trained at birth to become a skilled leader when it came to combat and diplomacy. Number 4. ERIK Killmonger. Erik's story in the comics is a little different from the one that we saw in the MCU. Instead, he is very much a victim who was manipulated and turned into a villain by the traitorous Ndemwe and Ulysses Klaue. In fact, it was Klaue himself who originally gave him the name Erik and encouraged him to discard his true Wakandan name of N'Jindaka, forcing Erik to treat Klaue as his true master. This made Erik resentful, and eventually N'Jindaka rose up against his captors, killing Ndemwe and abandoning Klaue. Erik would end up adopting the name Klaue gave to him to blend in. Eventually, Erik would find his way back to Wakanda and would begin to secretly plot to overthrow King T'Challa, becoming one of his greatest enemies. Erik himself has become a powerful adversary to Wakanda and even an emperor in his own right of the intergalactic empire of Wakanda. He not only has had the power of Black Panther, but is also intelligent, boasting a PhD in neuroscience and engineering. Also, every time Killmonger dies in the comics, he always seems to come back. So while he's not immortal in terms of abilities, plot-wise, he kinda is. Number 3. T'Challa. T'Challa is the most well-known iteration of Black Panther in the present day, especially now that we have the MCU version of him. But while some might focus on his fighting prowess, which is impressive, it should also be noted that T'Challa has also been granted supernatural powers since he became King of the Dead. He has necromancy skills and also has developed multiversal senses and awareness thanks to Galactus. Not only is T'Challa powerful in terms of his superpowers, but he is also known for his brilliant mind, which earned him his place in the Illuminati. Many may think of Shuri as the brains of the family thanks to her depiction in the MCU, but T'Challa is actually known for being just as brilliant, if not more, in the comics. He has a photographic memory and is also a master of physics, as well as a field that he created himself and discovered, known as shadow physics. He's super smart. Number 2. Shuri. Shuri has always been passionate about becoming the first female female Black Panther in Wakandan history. She is not only powerful because of how determined she is, but because of how hard she has worked towards that goal. She is determined, bold, brave, and strong-willed. Her half-brother himself trained her for this purpose, in case she was ever called upon to take his place, which of course ended up happening, making her the Queen of Wakanda and Black Panther in T'Challa's stead. At one point they were even both Black Panther. It was her determination and strong will that helped her to become such a spirited and skilled fighter. Shuri is also a genius, a brilliant inventor, and a skilled tactician and diplomat. She has also been gifted with supernatural abilities which allow her to change shape, size, and raise the dead. Number 1. MCU T'Challa. One of the most powerful versions of Black Panthers when we are looking at impact is T'Challa from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This isn't just because of how powerful that character is, how he manages to balance both the traditional and technologically advanced aspects of Wakanda like his father T'Chaka did in the comics, always doing his best as a ruler, a king, and a hero for his nation, but also for the world. It's also because of his growth through the Black Panther film. He is powerful and wise enough to see that one day a change is not only going to come, but needs to come. He is brave and strong enough to see that it is time for him to listen to those around him and share the truth about the power of Wakanda with the world. T'Challa does not let fear blind him in the end. He's not only powerful, but he's inspirational. Add in the fact that we had Chadwick Boseman portraying him in the film, and it only adds to the character's power. He was an amazing performer who always committed to each role that he took on. Chadwick Boseman was the one to develop the dialect of Wakanda, studying various different languages and dialects from across Africa to come up with it. It was also so well received that it became adapted by the rest of the cast when Black Panther came about. This wasn't just a man who played a hero on screen, but he became a hero in his own right, questioning and fighting against stereotypical roles for people of color and using his own voice to raise up and acknowledge everyday heroes. From playing real-world historical heroes to acknowledging James Shaw Jr., who saved lives by wrestling a gunman out of a Waffle House in Nashville, Tennessee during a mass shooting. Yeah, that's a thing that happened. Boseman gave away his award for Best Hero at the 2018 MTV Awards to Shaw, calling him up on stage with him to accept the award, acknowledging him as a real-life hero. If there is such a thing as people who are too good for this world, Chadwick Boseman was likely one of them.